Well, it's done, everyone. NASCAR and 2311 Front Row Motorsports have come to a resolution. They've come to a settlement in the lawsuit a lot earlier. This ended a lot earlier than I thought it would. Very excited to talk about it. That's why I'm wearing the NASCAR hat, because this outcome, the settlement, was the best case scenario for both parties. But before we talk more about that, please be sure to like and subscribe. It's totally free, costs nothing to you, and it only helps me out. So thanks. Thanks for watching, by the way. This is the Post Race Inspection Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas. And let's just get right into it. So, like I said, NASCAR in 2311 Front Row Motorsports have settled. So, what what took so long? Um, you know, like this in the visual aid window, if you're watching the video version of this podcast, JGR 2311 fan says, what I'm seeing from Reddit and X, and this is the consensus, this is my opinion too. Jim France's ego was the reason why NASCAR didn't settle earlier. Jim France was painted by the teams as being a very stubborn negotiator. You know, there was that council that was always talked about, the NASCAR board of directors or like council. It was, but no matter who said what on that council, Jim France always had the last word, and his word was the word of the law. So, um, everyone had a feeling that it was his stubbornness, him trying to rule with an iron fist, is what kept everyone from uh, finding this resolution sooner. It's kind of disappointing that it took probably close to $100 million of total court fees and lawyer fees for them to get to this point, but I'm still very glad that a settlement was reached rather than the trial going all the way through. Um, Now, I think this finally came to light because, or we finally got to this point this morning because um, for context, for the people that don't really understand how like lawsuit or antitrust trials go, it's not like a criminal trial where you have to, where the plaintiff has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused or did the crime. It's more so uh, whose story is more right than the others. So I feel like after yesterday into the evening hours, NASCAR and their lawyers kind of came together, and they were probably like, the lawyers probably came to NASCAR and they were like, look, it's after after how bad that after how bad NASCAR looked after the plaintiffs half of the trial, after all those examinations and cross examinations, it really didn't look good. Um, the I would say NASCAR probably still had about a 35 to 40% chance of winning, but they had completely lost the jury at that point. From like a moral or like a good guy bad guy standpoint, the internal texts that were released that have been talked about, for a month already. Um, Jim France, Steve O'Donnell, and Steve Phelps's um, examinations by um, NASCAR or by 2311's lawyers were just terrible because the strategy of, not trying to give away too much and just when you get examined by your own lawyers, that's when you can talk. It works to a point, and it worked to a point for the first couple of days, but it was annoying enough and it got grating enough to where even the judge was urging them to push, kind of get things moving, answer the damn question, that kind of thing. Um, so out of this, the only things that have been released so far have been, let's go over to x.com/postracepod. Please follow me on Twitter. I only have one follower, so please give me a follow. Um, so Bob Pocker says case is officially settled. The jury has been dismissed. Judge said he feels like the settlement is good for the NASCAR, the entity, and NASCAR, the industry, and ultimately the fans. Now, what is said? Jeffrey Kessler tells the court, I'm pleased to say the parties have positively settled this matter in a way that will benefit the industry going forward. Document will be presented to Judge Bell shortly. All items are agreed to on the document, just waiting on typing the final document out. And then a few minutes later, Bob Pockrass announces the teams did get evergreen charters. So that was one of the couple of things that that got released. There's a lot more to this agreement that is not going to be disclosed, I don't think, such as the monetary damages that the teams were awarded, if at all, kind of bits and bobs that were thrown in as part of the compromise. But Jenna Fryer says, source, and this is murky because there's going to be a Thursday afternoon call to discuss the new charter model. Teams will now also share in international revenue for the first time, and the previous 3-strike rule will be reinstated as a 5-strike rule. Teams will get 1/3 of the revenue from the IP, and charter revenue will have to be periodically negotiated amidst new media rights deals. So basically, the teams got what they wanted after all. So the teams wanted evergreen, which means they wanted perpetual charters. They wanted permanent franchise in the sport. That's what they got. The only thing that they have to negotiate is with every new media rights deal cycle, they will negotiate with NASCAR how much of a split of both the USA and international revenue and broadcasting rights that they get from that. Um, so I feel like it, it definitely feels like that, you know, NASCAR was about 35 to 40 they had about a 35 to 40% chance of winning, so it it seems like the teams definitely got at least 65% of what they wanted. So it's kind of right in line with, you know, who they thought was going to win what. I think I think this whole trial made Jim France, or at least the lawyers, telling him that the results of the first 9 days of the trial, um, I think Jim France finally came down to earth, especially with the letter. I'm sure that he read the letter from Johnny Morris of Bass Pro Shops yesterday. I'm sure he came down to earth and realized that stuff wasn't going to turn out good for NASCAR um, unless they came to an agreement outside of the ruling of the court. Because I mean, where does upper management of NASCAR go at this point? As far as as far as the reputation of everyone involved, like, Of course, Ben Kennedy is fine. Lisa France Kennedy's fine, but I mean, how how does the PR between how does the reception and reputation and kind of relationship get repaired in the garage area between the garage area and upper management in NASCAR without both of the Steves being outed? Um, it's just shown this trial has shown that they hold nothing but contempt. Steve Phelps at the bare minimum, I would say include Steve O'Donnell in on that because he wasn't outright denouncing. He was kind of going along with whatever with the vitriol that Steve Phelps was saying about the teams. It's it's just very and that's the stuff that was documented on text, like the stuff that was said about Richard Childress. Imagine what they're saying behind closed doors with no like documented stuff. Imagine what they were saying. I think another thing is, and I heard this as a rumor, but they decided to not have Roger Penske testify because, the discussion that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawyers were having with, I believe it was Steve O'Donnell and also Scott Prime, with relations to the tracks. Um, Roger Penske, according to rumors, Roger Penske might have ended up being more beneficial for the teams if he had testified, and he was on the list to testify and be examined. And unless the trial ends early, if you're on the list to be called to the stand, unless they shorten your list, you're you're going to the stand. So Roger Penske, of course, owns IndyCar. He owns Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he might have had to disclose, and the teams might have had to reveal that NASCAR undoubtedly did some antitrust, some monopolistic practices, um, as far as disallowing IndyCar to compete on NASCAR owned racetracks. Obviously, they don't race at Texas Motor Speedway anymore. That track is owned by NASCAR. And really, the only growth as far as going to new tracks the IndyCar has had have been tracks that are not owned by NASCAR, aside from Nashville Superspeedway, which is just, I think, being used as a replacement for now, as a placeholder for the Nashville Street Circuit, as the new the new Tennessee Titans Stadium is being built in downtown Nashville. So I feel like if Penske had the chance to take the stand, it would have been even more damaging for NASCAR's case. So I feel like that's another big factor as to why the lawyers might have urged Jim France to settle, because it could have really gotten out of hand, and I feel like it would have drastically lowered NASCAR's chances of winning. So because the team settled, who wins? The fans. The fans win. The fans won this by far. The teams and NASCAR compromised, but the fans won. Let me tell you why. Depending on who won, this could have either been bad for one party, bad for both parties, or bad for everyone, including the whole industry and the fans. So let's just let's just illustrate an example for you real quick. So if NASCAR would have won the trial, if this would have gone all the way and NASCAR would have somehow pulled off a win in this trial, Um, it would have meant that 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, because of their volatile profitability, I mean, Denny Hamlin said, and Michael Jordan said this about a year ago at this point, they would have immediately closed doors if they lost the trial. And obviously, that's bad for the industry because that's a loss of jobs. It's bad for the fans because that's two less teams, five less cars to root for week in and week out. It's less cars on the track, and it it's bad for NASCAR because Michael Jordan, he's Michael Jordan. He's one of the most popular athletes in the history of the world. And he's invested so much time and money over the last 5 years, so much passion in NASCAR. He's been a fan his whole life. To have him exit the sport in such a disappointing and to go out with a whimper like that, to be forced out of the sport, you can debate on whether or not it would be his own doing or whatever, making his own bed, but to be forced out of the sport, it would just be it would be a huge hit for the PR of NASCAR, an even bigger hit than what they've already taken. So if NASCAR had lost, if the teams had won, that means, this ruling is up to um it's up to the judge. The damages would be awarded by the judge or would be determined by the judge. The charter system, that would be in total jeopardy. Who knows what would have been decided there? Um, let alone the damages that the teams were seeking. It was something upwards of $300 million. If they had been awarded that, then NASCAR might have had to sell a couple of tracks or two. For example, what if they had to sell Homestead Miami Speedway or something like that, something on very valuable real estate land, selling the rest of Auto Club, um, that track wouldn't be bought. These tracks that NASCAR holds wouldn't be bought by other event organizers or racetrack organizers. They'd be bought by real estate development companies, and they'd be plowed down and turned into housing or warehouses. That's not what anyone wants to see. Um, so I'm very glad. It was, I mean, I basically jumped for joy in the office today. Talked about it with a couple of my friends. Um, I'm so satisfied and happy that this resolution was made. And, this doesn't change much in the day-to-day operations of things. Um, the racing is still going to stay the same. We don't even know what the championship format is going to be at this point. So we're still going to see that, and I'm going to react to it as soon as that gets announced. But man, it's one step closer to greatness. I tell you what, the dark clouds have cleared, and it's sunny in NASCAR world. That'll be it for me. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening in if you're listening to the podcast. Once again, this has been the Post Race Inspection Podcast. Please, it's free. It's free to do. Like, comment. Let me know your thoughts on the trial. Let me know your thoughts. Please put them in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter. It's free. Please, please do it. Let's grow this community. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.